So we're going to get started with today's meeting, June 7th, 2020. And we're going to start with a text from the book Living Spring, text number 15, called Fraternity. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Jesus in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 35. Ever since Constantine's victory, which opened the doors of political hegemony to the Christian world, we have been through many experiences to show that we are disciples of Jesus. We have held renowned councils, formulating daring conclusions regarding the nature of God, the soul, the universe, and life. We have encouraged dreadful wars that imposed misery and terror on those who could not believe in the tenets of our faith. We have fought over the tomb of the Divine Master by spreading ravenous fire and brandishing the murderous sword. We have created commandants and religions, posts by distributing poison and wielding the dagger. We have lit fires for burnings at the stake, constructed gallows, invented tortures, and built prisons for those who disagreed with our points of view. We have encouraged insurrections that caused animosity between brothers and sisters in the name of the Lord, who on the cross bore witness of this devotion to all humankind. We have built beautiful and sumptuous palaces and basilicas in his memory, forgetting that he did not have a stone on which to rest his head. And today, we still nourish schemes and discord, digging trenches of incomprehension and animosity against one another because we interpret the faith differently. Nevertheless, the word of Jesus is irrefutable. We cannot claim to be wards of the good news simply by our outward attitudes. Yes, we do need education, which improves the mind, justice, which preserves the order, material progress, which enriches work, and counsels, which support the study of the faith. However, without the light of love, all human activity may be lost in darkness. We will be accepted as learners of the gospel by cultivating the kingdom of God, which begins in our inner life. Therefore, let us extend pure and simple fraternity all around us by mutually helping one another. The fraternity that labors and assists, understands and forgives amid the humility and service that ensure the victory of the good. Wherever we are, let us practice fraternity, recalling the word of the Lord, who clearly and surely asserted, "By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Let us do our initial prayer. Let us close our eyes. Take a deep breath. Let us try to create a little bubble around us to help us concentrate, to help us gather our thoughts. And in our little bubble, let us raise our thoughts, our hearts, our feelings to our beloved teacher, our older brother Jesus. let us feel in our hearts the love Jesus has for us. Let us fill our hearts with the compassion that Jesus has towards us. And then we will feel thankful. We will feel thankful for the blessings that we have. We will feel thankful for being here, now, alive. We will be thankful for having the opportunity to learn, to study, to be an apprentice of our Master Jesus. Thankful to our guardian angels that never give up on us, that keep guiding us directly or indirectly. Let us feel thankful for all the superior spirits that guide Spiritism all over the world, in Canada, and specifically here in Alberta. Thank you, Master. Thank you, our spiritual friends. May we be able to learn. May we be able to feel and exercise this love, this compassion that will lead us to the true virtue of fraternity, to treat our brothers and sisters the way we want to be treated, to love one another, and finally understand and finally comprehend what it means to be Jesus' disciple. May this simple talk here today touch our hearts. May it inspire us to do better tomorrow than we did today, and so on. So be it. Thank you, Eric, for the music. All right, so for starters, as we have on the screen, next Sunday we will be having this year's second Cherishing Life, and the subject is drug abuse prevention. This is the third year we are working on this theme. For this year, we have a couple different presentations. So it's going to be from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. With an hour and a half break for lunch. We will publish the titles for the talks and all the times properly so that everybody can follow with us, and if for any reason you have to interrupt or lost concentration, it's recorded and we can always go back and listen to it. So everybody stay tuned. Like I said, this year has a little bit of a different content from the two previous years. So we have no information, we have different approaches to similar themes. So we hope everybody can stay tuned or watch later. And as you know, the way our Cherishing Life workshops work, it's a number of talks that they are all connected to each other and they all evolved, and it goes from information, numbers, statistics, to what Spiritism says about that theme and to what we can do about it. So it's called drug abuse prevention. So how can we work on this prevention, not just physically, but also spiritually? And also for anybody who is already addicted, who is already having problems. We will also talk about on not just how to prevent, but how to spiritually cure it. So stay tuned, and we hope everybody can be there. Okay, so today is the first Sunday of June 7th, and this month is a very, very special month for us here at FSS. This June is our anniversary. It's our 5-year anniversary. Back in 2015, in June, is when FSS was officially founded with the government, with all the documents. Before, we were study groups in 2 houses. And as the study groups grew and we ran out of space, and we also felt the need for more works other than just studies, which is what we had, both study groups got together and we finally got to the conclusion that we were too big for house meetings and we had to grow, and that's what we did 5 years ago. So this month, the virtue of the month is obviously Fraternity, to celebrate our anniversary. And we will be having quite a few talks during this month celebrating this virtue as well. And when we talk about fraternity, I can't say in Portuguese, I'm gonna say in Brazil, where Spiritism is widespread, we have a good understanding of what this word is. However, in North America, when we use the word fraternity, sometimes it's misunderstood. So I went to dictionary.com and I looked up the definition for fraternity. So here's what dictionary.com told me. It gave me 6 different meanings. So the first and the most commonly used in North America is a local or national organization of male students, primarily for social purposes, usually with secret initiation and rites, and a name composed of 2 or 3 Greek letters. And I think we've all seen those in Hollywood movies. The female counterpart of a fraternity is a sorority. And both words come from Latin, and the very little Italian I speak, 2 words that I know are fratello, which means brother, and sorella, which means sister. So that's where fraternity and sorority come from, brother and sister. And like I said, it's the most widespread definition here in North America. The other 5 definitions are a group of persons associated by or as if by ties of brotherhood. So this is getting closer to what we are. Third, any group or class of persons having common purposes, interests, etc. For example, the medical fraternity. And here at this point, we're not talking about genders anymore. 4, an organization of laymen for religious or charitable purposes. A sodality, or a society. 5th, the quality of being brotherly, brotherhood, which is synonym with fraternity. When we talk about liberty, equality, and fraternity. And 6, the relation of a brother or between brothers, and here we go back to gender. So if we look at all these definitions, these 3, number 3, 4, and 5, are a combination of what FSS where he helped us as humanity from the teachings he gave us to curing people, guiding people, talking to everybody, having no prejudice, making a tax collector one of his closest disciples. So what did he show us? That he loved us. So a disciple is somebody who follows the master teachings. So if we're not loving one another, as we saw in the text, if we're burning people at the stake in Jesus' name, and this could be metaphorically as well, in terms of criticizing or having prejudice, if we're still at that stage, can we truly call ourselves Jesus' disciples? Because that's not what he showed us. What he came to show us was that he loved us. So this is why he said, if you love one another, everybody you know will know you are my disciples. And then Jesus, under another name, the Spirit of Truth, also said in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 6, item 5, Jesus says, Spiritists, love one another. That is the first precept. A precept is a rule of conduct, a rule of action, a maxim, a moral conduct guide. So love one another. That is the first direction of conduct. Educate yourselves is the second. Within Christianity, we usually stop at this, right? We usually stop at the educate yourselves is the second. But then there's one more sentence that is extremely important and that should always go together with this quote or this citation that says, within Christianity, you will find all the truths. So everything we need to know the truth, and the truth will set you free, is contained within Christianity, within the precepts, within the concepts of Christianity, in the Gospel of Jesus and in the Spiritist codification as well. So, again, Jesus himself told us that. First, 2,000 years back, and then 160 years ago, he says this. And then, researching to prepare this presentation, I usually use a website called Bible Gateway for translations, because since English is not my first language, and Bible language is fairly specific, it uses specific terms, I always have to go back and research, and I look at different translations. So looking up, I needed to know exactly where Jesus said, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So I went to the website, Bible Gateway, and I searched love one another. And then 21 results came up for love one another in this translation, in the translation for the New King James Version. 21 results for love one another in the New Testament. I just searched the Gospel, the New Testament. Now, why? Why would we have so many? Why would we have 21 results for love one another? That's exactly what Jesus brought us. That's exactly what fraternity is, to love one another. Okay, so far so good. We understand that. Simple concept. But the real question is, how do we do it? I know that I have to do it. But how do we love one another? Is it by choosing the right religion? Is it by becoming a spiritist? Is it by watching all the talks and courses from enlightened people or from famous spiritists, Catholics, Dalai Lama? Is it by teaching what we know to others? Is it by trying to feel a true apprentice of Jesus through spiritism or another religion? Is it by loving ourselves? Is it by following the golden rule? How can we learn to love one another? So now we go back to what I said about us looking at question 919. It is a very long answer. We don't have the whole answer here, but we have most of it. So for now, first we're going to read the question and answer, and then we're going to talk about it. So bear with me while we read the answer so that we can talk about the answer. And question 919 is actually divided in two parts. So first is 919. The answer is fairly short. And then, as usual, Kardec goes back and he pokes a little. He digs deeper like he usually does. He wasn't satisfied with just a short answer. He wanted more. And he got a whole lot more. So let's see what he got. So first, question 919. Kardec asks, what is the most efficacious or effective method of ensuring one's own moral improvement in the present life and resisting the attraction of evil? So Kardec wants to know, how can we evolve? If the purpose of our life, if the purpose of incarnating and reincarnating is to evolve, to progress, to better ourselves, he wants to know, how do we do it? And resist our bad inclinations, our bad tendencies. And then the spirits answered, one of the sages of antiquity has told you, know thyself. So this is a good answer, fine. But then again, Kardec wanted more. What is to know thyself? So Kardec asks, 919a. We fully admit the wisdom of the maxim. So we understand that knowing ourselves is very wise. But this self-knowledge is just what it is most difficult to acquire. So knowing ourselves is the most difficult thing. By what means can we acquire it? So now Kardec is asking for a method. So it's important, we understand, but it's very hard to get there. So how do we get there? And like I said here, we have most of the answer, not all of it, but most of it. So we're going to read through it and then talk about it. So the spirits start answering. Actually, not the spirits, we will see at the end. This specific answer was from Saint Augustine. And Saint Augustine said, do what I myself used to do during my life upon the earth. At the close of each day, I examined my conscience. So this in itself, examine your conscience. Fine. So we already know one action. But then St. Augustine keeps on saying how exactly he did it. He gives us details of how to do it. And we always keep telling people, go and study question 919a. So let's do it here together. So he continues. So he examined his conscience. He reviewed, I revealed all that I had done and asked myself whether I had not failed in some duty, whether someone might not have reason to complain of me. So when we say examine our conscience, it's not, oh, what did I do? Okay. So he's giving us more, how to reflect. He's teaching us how to reflect on our own actions. So it's not just everything I did, but did I fail in something that I did? Would anybody have reason to complain of me? And he continues. It was in this way that I succeeded in obtaining a knowledge of myself and in ascertaining is making sure that there was in me that needed reforming. So what there was in me that needed reforming. So he got to know himself, and he was able to pinpoint, to select what he needed to change, what in him needed reforming. So reform, to form again, what he needed to deconstruct and put back together. Then we skip a little bit and continue. And then he said what he did, and now he's telling us. Ask yourself these questions. Inquire of yourself what you have done and what was your aim in such and such a manner. Whether you have done anything that you would blame in other. Can we think of situations where we went wrong and we ended up blaming someone else? Whether you have done anything that you would be ashamed to avow. Avow is declare, confess, admit. So is there anything you did that you would be ashamed to admit you did, to confess you did? And he continues. Ask yourself also this question. If it pleased God to call me back at this moment into the other life, should I, on returning into the world of spirits, in which nothing is hidden, have to dread the sight of anyone? So if I were called back to the spiritual world right now, where we can't hide what we did like we can here when we're incarnated, would we dread the sight? Would we feel uncomfortable seeing someone about something that we did? Examine what you may have done first against God. And here when St. Augustine says God, he's not talking about a personification of God, but he's talking about the divine laws, which is how we interact and communicate with God through the divine laws, the natural laws. So have we done first against God, meaning have we tried to break or bend any of the divine laws? Next, against your neighbor. So did we do anything wrong against other people? Here, neighbor is not the person beside your house, but in a biblical sense, anybody else other than you. And lastly, against yourself. Have we loved ourselves, or have we undermined ourselves? Have we not worked hard to fulfill our potentials? The answers to these questions will either give response to your conscience or show you some moral malady. Malady is something bad, of which you will have to cure yourself. So we've been saying here over and over and over again that we can't save someone else. We can't cure someone else of a spiritual disease, of a trauma, of addiction, of depression, of anything like that. We can help them, but only the person can cure him or herself, right? It's a job that is personal and intransferable. It's a job that we have to do ourselves. As much as we would like somebody to come and rescue us and save us and eliminate our problems, the only person who can cure me is me. And St. Augustine says that. Self-knowledge is therefore the key to individual improvement. But you will ask, how is one to judge oneself? So self-knowledge is the key, right? So Allan Kardec says, it's important to know ourselves, but it's hard. How do we do it? St. Augustine gave us the roadmap. He gave us the guidelines for self-knowledge, for knowing ourselves. So he's saying, knowing ourselves is the key to improve, to evolve, to progress. But then, how do we know that we're getting there? Right? When you answer mathematical problems, how do you know that your answer is right? So now he's also going to give us guidelines to judge, if not judge in a negative sense, but to assess. So instead of judge, let's say assess, to make an assessment of where we are with our self-reflections. Because even if we try to think about our whole day and we use all the guidelines he gave us, we can still slip, right? We can still lie to ourselves and say, yeah, no, it wasn't that bad. Or like he said, blame someone else. So how do we know if we're doing this truly in our hearts? Is not each man subject to the illusions of self-love, which diminish his faults in his own eyes and find excuses for them, like we just said. Sometimes, and here when he says self-love, he means our pride. So aren't we subject to our pride in the sense that we diminish our faults, so we're this guilty, someone else is this guilty? So don't we do that sometimes? Don't we find excuses for our actions? And then he says, the miser is somebody who has a lot but doesn't want to share. Somebody who wants to hog everything, to keep everything to themselves. So the miser thinks himself to be merely practicing economy and foresight. So somebody who doesn't want to give, who doesn't want to share, be it material things or anything else. So they think they're only looking into the future and preparing themselves. The proud man thinks his pride to be only dignity. How many times have we seen that? People disguising pride behind a mask of dignity, saying that that's dignity, when it's actually pride. This is true, but you have a means of ascertainment that cannot deceive you. And here is where he's going to give us the fail-proof rule if we follow it, because we can still fool ourselves. So he says, when you are in doubt as to the quality of any one of your actions, when you're not sure, ask yourself, what would be your judgment in regard to it if it were done by another? So, how would we feel if we were receiving our own action? So that is a very, very effective way of assessing, of evaluating if our actions were positive or negative. Would we like to receive our own actions? Would we like others to do to us what we did? Which is basically the golden rule again. So He continues. Endeavor is make an effort to. Endeavor also to learn what is thought of it by others. So what do others think of your actions? And again, we are not judging a person. We are talking about examining, evaluating actions. So endeavor also to learn what is thought of it by others. It meaning the actions. And do not overlook the opinion of your enemies, for they have no interest in disguising the truth. And God often places them beside you as a mirror to warn you more frankly than would be done by a friend. Sometimes a friend will avoid telling us what they truly think in order not to hurt us. Our enemies don't have to worry about that. So again, using common sense, using our better judgment, better assessment, what do other people think of our actions, including our enemies? So he's not saying only listen to your enemies, but he's saying don't disregard, don't ignore the opinion. And again, it's up to us to reflect and assess if we would like to receive our own actions, what others think of our actions, and that is gonna guide us on how to do it better next time, or maybe we have already done what was supposed to be done. And all this process of self-reflection will reassure us that we are in the right path. But it's an exercise that has to be done constantly. St. Augustine says that he did it every night before he went to bed, which is probably the best time to do it before you forget it the next day and after the whole day has passed. And why is it so important that we put St. Augustine's advice in practice? Why is it so important that we practice that? We have been talking a lot for many years, actually, for about 106 years. We've been talking about the planetary transition from a world of trials and atonement to a world of regeneration. We've been talking about that since the codification. And in the last chapter of the book Genesis by Allan Kardec, right here, the green cover, the last chapter, chapter 18, is called The Time Has Come. In some translations, it's The Time Has Arrived, but it's the same idea. I highly recommend reading that chapter because every single line is very informative, is very comforting, and every line actually reinforces the world we're living in right now and helps us understand why the things that are happening, for what purpose they are happening, and what's going to come out of it. So I highly recommend last chapter of the Genesis, chapter 18, called The Time Has Come or The Time Has Arrived. If you don't have the book, you can find PDF online, or you can look up Kardecpedia, which is free online. And in a meeting during this past week, we were talking, and Eric mentioned that the word fraternity shows up in the Genesis, and more than half of the occurrences of the word fraternity happen exactly in this chapter. So it is extremely important that we talk about this chapter in a talk about how we can love one another as brothers and sisters. So I bring just a few things from that chapter. Like I said, there's so much information, and It's a wonderful chapter. So I'm going to bring it to you for us to reflect on. At one point, Kardec says, well, actually it starts, the very first paragraph of this chapter says, the time set by God, we are told everywhere, in which great events will occur for the regeneration of humankind. So now is the time. Now is the time where great events will occur for the generation of humankind. And again, this was written 160 years ago, before the two world wars, before the Spanish flu, before this pandemic we're living right now. So again, reading chapter 18, it feels like it was written yesterday, because it applies 200% to everything we're going through right now. And then Kardec says, what people need nowadays is not only the development of their intelligence, but the elevation of their sentiment. And for this, they must do away with everything that incites their selfishness and pride. So again, how can we love one another? How can we try to feel that, as Jesus says in the gospel, the sun rises for the good and the bad. The rain comes for the just and the unjust. That God is fair to all of us. So how can we see every human being as our equals, as children of God, if we're still selfish and prideful? So more than developing our intelligence, which we have been doing constantly throughout humanity history, we also need to elevate our sentiments. Not just feelings in terms of physical feelings, but noble feelings, which are sentiments. Then, Kardec also says, after having more or less exhausted the material well-being that is the product of intelligence, one realizes that the supplement to this well-being can only be found in moral development. And looking at this statement, it's easy to associate it with so many cases that we see of people who, after getting the job of their dreams, who after buying everything they dreamed of buying, who after traveling everywhere they wanted to go, feel that emptiness. Because they put those things, which are, as Kardec says, material well-being, they put those things as their objective. They put those things as their priority. But once they have exhausted this, once you have bought everything you wanted, once you have achieved the job you wanted, once you have done everything you wanted to do, we realize that the only thing more than we can do is to evolve morally. That's what's going to actually fulfill us, not the material well-being that we thought at first. So here we can see, we can have a very good idea of the root of this existential emptiness that is so common nowadays, that we see so much nowadays. And then, right after that, Kardec says, the more one person advances, the more one feels that which is missing. So the more we evolve, the more we advance, the more we become aware of what we're lacking, of what we're missing. We start to become conscientious, aware, understand what we're lacking, what we're missing, without, however, being able to define it clearly. So again, that existential happiness, that existential emptiness that says, I did everything I wanted to do. I bought everything I wanted to buy. Something is missing. I'm lacking something. What is it? So a lot of people can't define what it is, which many times leads to deep sadness, to depression, and other diseases as well. It is the effect of the interior work which is being effected for regeneration. So again, is it a bad thing that the person gets to that emptiness? No, not at all. Because that is going to be the trigger. That's going to be the point when you feel the emptiness, is the point when we start to regenerate. When we feel that pain is the point where we think, what do I need to do not to feel the pain? We have desires and aspirations, which are the prelude, which come before a better condition. It's basically the same idea when we say that necessity is the mother of invention. If there's no need for something, why would somebody think about it? So when that emptiness comes, that's when we start to think. That's the necessity. So what will come from that necessity of fulfillment? The moment we understand that it's not material things, that it is a moral evolution, a moral development that we need, then we start working towards the regeneration. So this negative part is what comes before a better condition. So you can't invent a cure for a disease that doesn't exist. So after the disease comes, then we need to cure it. And this is what he says when he's talking about prelude to a better condition. In this chapter, he also talks a lot about the two generations on earth right now, the old and the new generation. The old, he explains that the old generation is the generation that still is not interested in the collective well-being, in the collective good. Some are neutral and some do evil or bad things just for the sake of doing it, just because they interpret it as fun. So this is the generation, the old generation, that only wants power at all costs, that only wants money at all costs, without thinking about the moral consequences of their actions. And he talks about the new generation. And the new generation is the generation who is worried about fraternity, who is all worried about how can we live better? How can we improve the conditions for everybody? And he also explains that this new generation is made basically, let's say, from two groups, mostly from two groups. One group of spirits who are already a bit more evolved and come to help us. But the second part of the group are spirits who used to be from the old generation, but through the process that we just talked about, have been evolving, who have gone through that existential emptiness, who have gone through that realization that once all the material well-being has been fulfilled, there's more to it. That's not evolution. That evolution is our moral development. So right now in this transition period, we have these two groups, like the old and the new. And then he explains that slowly, little by little, this old group is getting their exit ticket, that they will be incarnating in other worlds, and actually that many of them will transfer to the new group, to the new generation. Because again, through the process of going through all that we just talked about, these people have chosen to improve. These people have chosen to think about everybody else, to try to learn and love one another like Jesus told us to do. And then he says, the great collective departures are not meant only to activate exits. So here he's talking about collective departures as, again, this is over 160 years ago, so before World Wars I and II, before Spanish flu, before so many collective disasters, before the tsunami, before September 11, before so many collective departures. But he says that the great collective departures are not meant only to activate exits, because some people have this idea that it's just for people who should no longer be here. So he's saying that it's not that, but to transform the mind of the masses more rapidly by drawing from it, removing from evil influences and lending greater ascendancy to new ideas. And these new ideas can be in terms of technology. These new ideas can be in terms of laws that should change, for example, in terms of advancements both in intelligence and in moral aspects. Like I said, reading him talking about collective departures feels like it was written yesterday. Moral progress will break down the barriers that separate peoples. Peoples here is in the plural because it's nations, different nations, not individuals. So moral progress will break down the barriers that separates peoples, nations, and will bring down class prejudices and silence the antagonism between sects, teaching people to regard one another as brothers, and sisters who are called to mutually help one another and not live at another's expense. Doesn't it sound that he's talking directly to us about what's happening right now? So break the barriers that separates nations, cultures, bring down class prejudices. So love one another as brothers and sisters. Isn't it what we're being invited to do right now? And then, in closing, he says, only moral progress can assure people of happiness on the earth by restraining evil passions. Moral progress alone can enable harmony, peace, and fraternity to reign. Reign here means to rule. So only our moral progress can ensure that we have harmony, peace, and when we say peace, we're not just talking about lack of wars, but we're talking about the peace that Jesus talks about, our conscience, knowing that we fulfilled our moral duties, right? And fraternity to reign. So I'm gonna double check if we have any comments here. Sorry, I'm a bit slow. Okay, so nothing on Facebook. And I should know better on my own phone. All right. So we don't have any questions or comments. Thank you very much. And like I said, it's a very special month for us. We hope to see everybody here. And when I say here, I mean online, for our Cherishing Life next week, where we're going to talk about drug abuse prevention, which is so important right now with the whole pandemic situation. Many people have been feeling hopeless, and that sometimes leads to us trying to numb our conscience, and the easiest and quickest way is either through legal or illegal drugs or medicine or alcohol. So we're gonna talk a lot about this and what Spiritism says about it, what are the consequences. We're gonna give examples of what happens while we're incarnated and in the spiritual world as well after we discarnate. So stay tuned and participate, ask questions, and we will do our best to educate all of us and to answer all the possible questions. So thank you very much. For now, let's do our final prayer. I don't know if Eric's listened, but can you turn on the music, Eric? Let's close our eyes. Raise our thoughts and thank God our Father, who loves us unconditionally, who sent us Jesus and many of his messengers to teach us, to show us about self-love, about loving one another, about what it means to be Jesus' disciples. Lord, we ask you for your blessing, for your enlightenment, for your protection, for all of us who are here, all of the brothers and sisters who are following live, who will be watching this later, for all the friends who wanted to participate but couldn't. We ask for your light and protection. For all those who are working right now in order to enable us to go by living our regular lives, all the healthcare workers, all the people who work with our food supply, transportation. Please protect all of our family members, all of our friends, all the people who are in risk groups. Please, Lord, give us strength to have the discipline for self-reflection. Give us strength to stop in our tracks when we realize we're going to do something we shouldn't. Give us strength to be proactive, to have compassion for our brothers and sisters, to have respect for all those who disagree with us, and to treat everybody the way we would like to be treated. May everybody have a blessed Sunday and a blessed week. so be it. Thank you very much.